Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Jew and Gentile podcast. With me is our host, co-host, Steve Herzig. How are you, Steve?
The man who's everything.
And you are everything. And I'm Chris Katolka. I'm so glad you're here with us for the 26th episode, Steve. 26. That actually means this is our halfway point of the year. 26. That's right. So,
and they said it wouldn't last.
Who said that?
I don't know.
We said that.
We probably did.
Oh, boy. Well, I'm so glad that everybody's here. Here we go. Hold on. Welcome in. I'm so glad that you're with us for our 26th episode of the Jew and Gentile podcast. And can I tell you what that means? Bupkis. It means bupkis. Absolutely nothing. It just means we've done this 26 times, and we've had a great time doing it over the past half of a year. We've gone through the book of Leviticus. We've looked at the covenants of God. And last week we celebrated Purim. And right now we're in Ruth. We're studying Ruth. We've done a lot in 26 weeks.
We have. And actually today, as we record this podcast, it actually is Purim.
It is today. It's the exact day of Purim today.
Exactly. I had my grandkids that I read chapter 6 to them, and Haman and Mordecai, and the 4-year-old lasted good.
Oh, I saw that Facebook post.
Yeah,
that you
the
did.
2 7-year-olds did really good. We had our masks. I had to wear a mask, so just like when we did last week. And in fact, they were the same masks. My wife got them, and
did she get those Moishenitzi Hamantaschen?
No, but actually, we went to Cleveland to see my mother because it's her 98th birthday.
Man, oh man!
On St. Patty's Day, she was born, and it would also be, I think, her 70th wedding anniversary if my father were alive. But either way, she is 98 years old.
Amazing.
Has her brain functioning better than mine. And we stopped at Davis Bakery in Cleveland, a very famous bakery, and got Hamantaschen.
Was it good?
And yeah. And we brought them for the kids to Pennsylvania. And so yesterday we had Hamantaschen, but that has nothing to do with Ruth. But anyway.
No, but it's a good celebration, and you could see your mom before she turns 98. That's amazing. That is amazing. And I do know your mom, and I know she's got all her wits about her, and she's out socializing all the time. She's a socialite. She plays mahjong.
Wii bowling, mahjong. Happy birthday, Mom, 98.
98. Happy birthday.
You could say happy birthday, Blanche.
Okay, happy birthday, Blanche.
There you go.
And
she is Bubby and Great Bubby.
Amazing.
So my kids call her Bubby, but her great grandkids call her Great Bubby.
And that's another Yiddish word right there.
Oh yeah, I don't know. Does that count for our Yiddish word of the day?
Not really. We've got another Yiddish word, but we'll be sure to. We always like to highlight the Yiddish words.
Yes, we do. And we're going to have a bonus word. We're actually going to have 2.
Okay,
I'll tell them ahead of time.
That's all right. Good. So you have something to look forward to. Hey, just Steve, we wrapped up our first episode or first class. Not episode, but class on the anti-Semitism through FOI Equip.
Ty Perry.
We have over 600 people that have registered for the class to be a part of it. 160 people from all around the world tuned in on Thursday night to hear from Ty, to talk about the biblical history of anti-Semitism. He just did a phenomenal job. You can actually go to YouTube right now to our FOI Equip YouTube page if you want to watch what Ty taught about. You can go there and watch last week's class. But I want to encourage you to go to foiequip.org, and you can register. You can still be a part of it. It's free. It's live. It's online. And you can simply go to foiequip.org to register now if you haven't already. But Ty just did a phenomenal job on it's a real sensitive but also intense subject, anti-Semitism.
And it is. And he has sandwiched in between 2 sessions on anti-Semitism. He'll be doing on Thursday night, he'll be covering Purim. Mm-hmm. And if those people who heard our podcast when we did Purim, they'll find that his is much more scholarly, much more in depth, and a much more helpful. Ours, you'll get a laugh. With his, you'll get an education.
Yeah, if you want to be smarter for us honoring and Purim, go to Ty's class. What would you say about ours, though? I mean,
I would say ours was boy, I'm at a loss for words, Chris, as to what ours is. I guess
it
ours
was a
is
good time.
Go grab your 4-year-old granddaughter, son, or a 4-year-old son and daughter, and have them listen to us, and they'll laugh.
That's right. You'll have a good time if you go back last week and listen to our PURIM program. And actually, because PURIM's today, we actually got an interesting news article about PURIM that we'll talk about later on.
Chris, if they get a chance to watch on YouTube, just look at us to start with those masks on. You sent I think you sent one picture to my wife and one to your wife.
Well, you sent one to my wife of my face.
There you go.
With with Haman. And
that's right. You were staring me in the face, and hey, at least we didn't make you Esther.
That's right.
You were Haman,
and you didn't bow. You did not bow.
Of course not. Mordecai refused to bow.
Exactly.
Nothing's going to happen to me.
That's exactly right. That's what I was saying during the whole episode last week. I know what my end is. I know it's coming soon. Okay, as I was slotted to be Haman. But hey, Steve, why don't we dive into Ruth? We're continuing our study on Ruth. We looked at Ruth chapter 1 2 weeks ago. We talked about the background of Ruth. We talked about Ruth chapter 1, the significance of what it meant to lose their husbands, what it meant for Ruth to gravitate to her mother-in-law and to make God her God and to make Naomi's people her people. She converted to Judaism. She converted to the Israelite faith. She followed Naomi, but ultimately she was following the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Yes, she was, Chris. And in fact, just a quick review, in just the 4 chapters of Ruth, we have a love story. We'll be talking about that and tying in the Yiddish Word. There's a love story going on in the book of Ruth, and in a lot of different ways. There's family, adoptive love that Ruth showed for Naomi, and Naomi to her. And then, of course, we'll be talking about Boaz today. But it's not just a love story, it's a redemptive story. And through this book of Ruth, we're going to learn about a very important Jewish law, and how important that law is, raising up seed when somebody dies, raising up seed in the family. And then it's a harvest story. So you got the redemptive story, a love story, a harvest story. And, there's movies out and all that. But chapter 2 is just common biology. A gal is out in the field and a guy says, "Hey, who's that gal?
Who is this person? I've never seen her before." And he literally has never seen her before. I mean, this is a small, I think sometimes we can think Jerusalem and Bethlehem as these big places. They were smaller. I mean, they were big for their time, but they were smaller cities. So
people knew each other.
They knew each other. And I'm sure Boaz is going out into the field and he sees this woman and he's going, "Wait a minute.
Who's that girl?
I've never seen her before." And all because of the story leading up to this moment. So Steve, why don't you take it away? I'll let you start with Ruth chapter 2.
Well, it starts off in verse 1. And there was a relative of Naomi's husband, a man of great wealth. That's already good, Chris. Now, one of the stigmas attached to Jewish people is we're all rich. I remember going to college my first year, and I had a roommate who was African American, great guy, and I was moving in, and he said, "Hey, can I literally just moving in?" He said, "Hey, can I borrow your car?" I said, "I don't have a car. My parents just are dropping me off." He said, "Oh, hey, I'll help you move your stereo. You're bringing a stereo in, right?" And I said, No, I didn't bring a stereo." He said, "Wait a minute. They told me at the front desk I was rooming with a Jewish guy. Where's your money?"
No, you're kidding.
I'm not kidding you. There's stigma attached. We're not all rich. But in this case, he was a man of great wealth, of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. So Ruth, the Moabitess, said to Naomi, "Please let me go to the field and glean heads of grain after him, in whose sight I may find favor." And she said to her, "Go, my daughter." Then she left, went and gleaned in the field of the reapers, and she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Now Boaz came from Bethlehem, said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered him, "The Lord bless you." Then Boaz said to the servant who was in charge of the reaper, "Whose young woman is this?"
That's exactly right.
And he probably said it much who is this gal? I haven't seen her around. So the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, said, it's a young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. And so it's going to go on to talk about, hey, we gotta help her out.
Yeah.
And
can I say too?
Sure.
I was just, as you were reading, it really highlights what family he comes from. He comes from Elimelech. Elimelech is it's Naomi's former husband, the widow. She's a widow now. It's her husband who had passed away. So he's in the family. That's the big thing too.
Huge. That's going to play shortly later.
Yeah.
Yep. You're right. And it's very, very important. It goes on. And she said, please let me glean and gather the reapers among the sheaves. So she came and continued from morning until now, though she rested a little in the house. Then Boaz said to Ruth, you will listen, my daughter, will you not? Do not go to glean in another field, nor go from here, but stay close.
Stick around.
Just
stick
stay
around.
Close.
That's right.
I'll take care of you.
That's right. I just think about all the different generations and time periods of how people, showed interest, how men pursued women. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I had to pursue my wife. Like I had to get up enough gusto to walk over to her and say, hi, my name's Chris, and, get to know her. And I mean, I was sweating bullets. Like, you don't want to.
She was a fast runner. You were running after her, weren't you?
I was as fast as I could. She was running fast away from me as she passed. No, but it was, I think about today. I hear stories today of how, people don't even talk to one another. They text one another all the time. Hey, you want to go out on a date?
I think I heard a text on your computer.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what it was. But it's funny. Here he's saying, hey, don't go to another field. Just stay here.
Keep it right here. Keep it parked here. In fact, I'll make it worth your while. So what does he do? He tells the guys, leave a little extra. Leave, in the fields. Make sure that she has enough stuff to glean.
Yeah.
And so she could go back with her bag full. And this is important. And just there's a human dynamic here. Yet, how important is the book of Ruth as we think in terms of the plan of God, of that Abrahamic covenant, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? How important is this little story as you progressively read? Because we're reminded, and it's in this chapter, she's not an Israelite.
Nope.
She's a Moabite.
Exactly.
This story, for the reader who's progressing through the text, especially Jewish reader, is saying, man, this is Moabite. How's that happening?
Yep. Specifically because in Deuteronomy, it does prohibit Israelites from engaging in many ways, not just marriage. And now all of a sudden, here is Boaz pursuing a Moabite. You wondered if he knew it at the time. Do you think he knew she was a Moabite at that time?
I think so. I think so. And when they came in, they said it. She was Ruth, a Moabite. So the text tells us. But the overriding of that text is the Holy Spirit, who Jewish and Gentiles, whoever's reading this is obviously in the Older Testament text. So, and Jewish people accept this as God's word. So it's obviously God. You got to pay attention to the context here, and it should arrest us. It should arrest the reader. You might not have the answer, or she might not have the answer, but she said, wait a minute. You'd have to say, wait a minute, this isn't the norm here. This is a little different. So in verse 11, it says, and Boaz answered and said to her, it has been fully reported to me all that you have done for your mother-in-law. Isn't that interesting? It's amazing, Chris, in what God sees in our simple things. She wasn't a conniver. Remember the story in chapter 1?
Yep.
Her husband died, her sister-in-law's husband, her brother-in-law died, her father-in-law died. Naomi said, I'm bitter, just go. It's not going to happen with me. I can't raise up seed for you. It's over. And she committed right there. I don't think she knew what the end of the story would be. That's just like Abraham.
That's right. It's faith.
It's faith in action.
Yes.
It's seeing what you need to do regardless of the consequences. And you can't make people do that. It's just something that has to happen. And her action back then is now going to pay off here. And it's going to pay off big time by the time you get to the New Testament in chapter 1 of Matthew. But it's just amazing.
You've always taught me a phrase, growing up and hearing you speaking is, when somebody does something good, I always am impressed because at least I've heard you say, that person's faith, God's going to honor that person's faithfulness. I've heard you say that.
Absolutely.
God's going to honor that person's faithfulness. And that you speak about somebody who is, living today. Here's Ruth living 3,000 years ago. And you can see that God is honoring that faithfulness. That's what chapter 2 is all about, that he's setting up the situation for God to fulfill his faithfulness in Ruth because of her faithfulness to Naomi. Like this nice, pattern that's taking place of, God's faithfulness getting worked out through Ruth's faithfulness in this time.
Well, Chris, think of your own life, and I'd ask a listener to think of their life if they've trusted Christ as their Savior. And if they're walking, Enoch walked with God. If you're walking with God, as you sit here, and we didn't prepare for this. We haven't prepared a lot of these. We're busy. We say, oh, it's time to do a podcast. Think about it. Aren't you the sum total of the little acts of faith that you were previous to attribute to where you're and what you're doing right now?
100%.
You're the subtotal of faith acts, some of which you might not have noticed, but God did.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think of my own life, and I cannot believe. I mean, I know I'm here, but the things that I've done are all by God's grace. The position in terms of, we go to Israel. In fact, I'm leaving for Israel next week. I never thought I'd go to Israel. And when I went the first time in 1982, I never thought I'd be back.
Yeah.
But all the privileges that are given to us in whatever state you're in are the sum total of your faith acts. That's why you read Hebrews chapter 11. It's great to be able to see regular people doing extraordinary things simply because they believed. And this is a story of a woman who is as faithful as you can imagine.
You make a really good point too, because sometimes you overlook the mundane faithful moments, to be a faithful husband, to be a faithful father or wife or mother, that those moments of faith, you kind of take them for granted because they become mundane, they become repetitious, you do it every day, but you don't realize the impact that you're having on your children or even your grandchildren. And you can overlook those. Here's a simple act here. We're talking about a guy interested in a girl, and the plot line that's taking place, and yet God is going to work through that some amazing historical events in the Bible. What's going to come from this moment with Boaz and Ruth is going to, in the rest of the scriptures, actually. I mean, the rest of the scriptures hinge on this moment. You get King David, you get all the kings of Israel or of Judah, even to the point of Jesus, the Messiah. But it all, here we are reading just about Boaz who sees Ruth, and it's an act of love,
Absolutely. When I moved as a teenager, we moved to a house and there were railings in the front that needed painting. And my dad said, can you get out there and paint it? And it needed several coats. I never thought, okay, yeah, I'll do it. And I was painting it, and I did it a couple days in a row. And later on, there was a knock on the door. I forgot all about this story till you were talking about those little things. And guy knocked on the door and he said, hey, I saw you painting. He said, I passed by here a couple times, and you did it several days in a row. I noticed you really stuck to it. He said, I'm graduating college. And he said, I had this paper route, large paper route that put me through college. And I thought anybody who can come out day after day and stick to it, you might be interested in the kind of job, because you have to deliver 7 days a week. And I took that job and had it for like 5 or 6 years. But I wasn't applying for a job.
Yeah.
I was just painting the railing. But he noticed.
Yeah.
And it's the same kind of thing here. A little different. I wasn't a girl, he wasn't a guy, but he noticed. And Boaz noticed Ruth,
Mm-hmm.
and he happened to notice a woman who was dedicated to her mother-in-law, who had committed to her God, committed to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that plays a key role.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I like what it says here, because you are right. It says the overseer replied, verse 6, she is a Moabite who came back because Boaz is asking, who does this person belong to? Back from Moab with Naomi, she said, please let me glean and gather from among the sheaves behind the harvesters. She came into the field and has remained here from morning till now, except for the short rest in the shelter. And that's when, so Ruth Boaz did know that she was a Moabite. So I'm corrected there. It's right in the text.
Not a problem. But you can see, even though verse 1 says he has great wealth, the guy cheapens on the dinner. He cheapens on the dinner. Now Boaz said to her at mealtime, come here and eat of the bread. Wow, big spender. And dip your place of the bread in vinegar. Vinegar and bread? We're not in prison here.
Where's the filet mignon?
Yeah, right? I don't know. That's quite a date. But we joke culturally. That's fine. They eat together. He supplies the food, and she's going to pack quite a bit as she reaps it and does what's necessary so that Naomi can bake bread when she gets home.
Can I tell you a funny story? It's about my relationship with my wife. I would take girls out on a date when I was living here in Philadelphia. And, I'd take them out to these nice restaurants or whatever.
Oh, where'd you go, Chris?
Just some nice restaurant.
Steak, shrimp.
Whatever. Yeah. I would be paying. You know what I mean? That's all I'm trying to say is I'd be paying. So I take them out on these dates and then bupkis, nothing. And after a while, you kind of get like, well, what's the point of this? I'm just spending all this money. They're getting a nice meal. And then they move.
Thanks for the food. I'm not interested.
Yeah, not interested. So when I got to Dallas and I moved to Dallas, I changed my whole philosophy. And my wife was the first person that I tested it on. It was, I'm not buying the first meal. We're just going to go out. I'm going to get my meal or whatever, and she's going to get hers. And then if we get to a second date, I'll buy it.
Wow, that's quite a change. I never knew that, Chris.
Okay, so
how did she respond?
Well, here's the thing. So we have this great time. We're talking, back and forth. We go out for breakfast. So we had, it wasn't a dinner, but we had a cup of coffee and bagel. And so we go to pay, and I said, I'll take just my bagel and the coffee, and she could get her. And
man.
And so I know all of you are probably shaking your heads right now.
You're killing us here. I'm surprised there was a second date.
But here's what happened is that she had such a good time. This is what she says, that then she got in the car. She goes, but I don't understand. He didn't buy my meal. And so, but then I asked her out on a second date, and and she said yes. So that time I bought the meal, and then I explained my situation. But I like to say that it worked.
Yeah. Hey, can't argue with success.
4 kids later, you know.
Boaz had bread and vinegar with Ruth.
That's when you're talking about the date, it made me laugh. Yeah. So yes, but you're right. Culturally, this would have been
fine.
Yes, fine. So they get together, Ruth and Boaz. They have the food. Now what happens, Steve?
Well, it's interesting in verse 19. She brought back the grain in bundles and brought it back, and in verse 19, and her mother said to her, so this is Naomi saying, where have you gleaned today? Where'd you work? Blessed be the one who took notice of you. So Naomi you could see Naomi's faith, Naomi's trust in God. He's always on her lips. That's a good indication. And that's a good test as you're in social situations at church. Haven't you noticed that there's some people, and I love being around them, that just have such a close walk with God. They bring him in every conversation. And that's what she's doing here. The man's name with whom I work today is Boaz, she said. Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, blessed be he of the Lord who has not forsaken his kindness to the living and the dead.
Yep.
Very significant there. And Naomi said to her, this man is a relation of ours, one of our close relatives. Chris, that's significant.
Very, very much. This is the idea of a kinsman redeemer.
Oh, so important.
Goel. A goel in Hebrew. That's right. And again, it fits in with the law that we talked about in I think the first or second episode that we did on Ruth, where we talked about there was a welfare system that God had set up in case of an emergency like this, where you lose your husband at a young age as a woman and you have no one to take care of you. The Kinsmen Redeemer is the idea that you stay in the family. So you marry the next in kin, or I believe it's the closest of kin, and then it can move from there if that person decides, or maybe that person's married already, or whatever the case might be. So, but the idea is that you can marry within the same family in order to stay as almost like a a divine welfare system for the woman. And so here, Naomi's all excited because this isn't just some random Joe Schmo living in Bethlehem. This is family, which means now Boaz fits within the construct of this kinsman redeemer of the one who's in the family that could take her hand in marriage if it all seems to work out. So you can sense you can see Naomi going from leave me alone, I'm bitter, I've lost everything. And now, even as you're reading it, Steve, you can hear her coming back to life a little bit.
There is. A Goel has 3 requirements, Chris. And I know you know this. Number 1, you mentioned it, a kinsman. Had to be a relative. Number 2, had to have the geach.
The money.
Had to have the money. You have to have the money. A redeemer has to be able to pay. You've got to pay.
Mm-hmm.
And number 3, this was attributed to your wife, Karen, had to want to.
Yeah.
You had to want to.
That's right.
You might have the money and you might be a relative, but you say, nope, not interested.
And that's going to play out in the story too.
Very much so.
Yes.
And the kinsman redeemer is extremely important in context here, but as you fast forward, it becomes very important as far as the gospel is concerned and as far as redemption, the story of redemption. There's a story of redemption in Ruth, but there's this bigger story of redemption that plays out further down the line.
You know, it's funny because we don't really use the term kinsman anymore, but it just means family. It's
It means
part
relative.
of the family.
Yeah,
it's a relative.
yeah, yeah.
That's right. And so this is going to be a very important thing. But again, you can hear Naomi is, going from that
energized.
Yeah, all of a sudden she has this different tone about her. She's seeing life again. She's moving from death into life, and she's seeing hope.
And who's bringing her that hope? It's the circumstances, but her context is praising God.
Yeah.
It's God that she attributes the turnaround she would acknowledge is the turnaround that God provides for her.
He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead.
Amazing.
I really think that is one of the hardest things that people can do in life, is that when difficulty comes, you have to be able to see God's kindness even in the difficulty. And I know that can be very hard. And I know that, sometimes it's hard to see beyond our pain and our suffering and our hardships and the emotional issues we deal with and the spiritual issues, and when someone hurts us and all of that, when we lose loved ones. But even in the middle of that, you can see how Naomi is seeing God's kindness, because she's only a few, it's not like there's many years that take place in between chapter 1 and chapter 2, but it's enough for Naomi to, say, man, I see what God is doing here, and he's kind. And that, that's good. A woman who lost her husband and her 2 sons, younger sons, that's right. And so you can even see Naomi not only just coming back to life again, but coming back to life spiritually. This is kind of one of the first moments we hear something spiritual coming out of Naomi's mouth.
No question. I'm old, Chris, as you know, and I used to listen and still do. Even though he's been with the Lord a long time, I used to listen to J. Vernon McGee through the Bible radio, and his expression through rough times was, "This is where the rubber meets the road," and it's true. This is. The Bible is such an honest book. There's anything that we see today. Solomon said there's nothing new under the sun. Anything, any emotion you can think of, any kind of circumstance, it can be duplicated and found somewhere in the scripture. And you've just summarized it well for Naomi and Ruth. They experienced death of a loved one. They experienced what seemed to be poverty. Well, I know that was poverty. Naomi and Elimelech left because there was poverty, and they got out and they left Bethlehem, the land of bread, because there was no bread. But you can see that God is faithful. You can see they attribute that to him, and all these emotions, all the healing that takes place is because they trust in the one who is kind and merciful.
And that's where I think it's always important for us to keep our focus on that. There are moments where we wonder, God, do you hear me? God, are you out there? I feel alone. I feel abandoned. I've had those moments. But the reality is that I can stand here today or sit here today in the midst of all the ups and downs that I've had in my life. And I can still say to you, God's been kind to me. his kindness, his mercy, his favor is
His
another word.
mercy endures forever, the psalm says.
That's right. And it's new every morning, as Lamentation says. So
great is his faithfulness. We're ready to sing.
that's right. I'll leave you to do that.
Yeah, no. Not doing that.
All right. Well, listen, that's Ruth Chapter 2. I'm excited about Chapter 3 as we get deeper into this relationship that begins to unfold with Ruth and Boaz, and the tension that you're going to see building with this Kinsman Redeemer. There's a tension that takes place. But Steve, why don't we go ahead and move to the news?
Well, actually, Chris, you gave me this from Torah.com. I was not aware, so I'm going to lead it in for you to talk about. The headline reads from Torah.com. I don't think I've ever read from Torah.com. I'm going to go there. Torah.com. Is that a first for you too?
That is a first. Yep.
Okay, Torah.com.
That's a Facebook find right there.
Okay, that's great. Newly deciphered Qumran Scroll revealed to be Megillat Esther. Megillah Esther.
Yep, just like what we did last week.
The Megillah, the whole Megillah. But there's something unique about this in the Qumran Scroll. And you came in my office and told me you found this story. It's hilarious.
Well, and this is after, if you keep up with the Jew and Gentile podcast, thank you so much. Last week we did PURIM together, and so we found this between last week and this week, and Steve and I were laughing so hard in his office when we read this, because for years, Steve, I have been telling people when I talk about Esther, that Esther is the only scroll that was not found in the Dead Sea Scrolls of all the 66 of all the Old Testament books of the Bible in that were found in the Dead Sea, in the Qumran community. The only one missing was Esther, and of course we'd always say that was missing because God's name wasn't mentioned in it. Well,
can't say it anymore
because years ago archaeologists found this Dead Sea Scroll, but it was stained in wine. It's just covered in red
and
wine.
What do we know about wine during Purim, Chris?
Exactly. And so the article says, Steve, that the archaeologists who found it wanted to wait for the right moment for technology to come out so that they could decipher what the text says. And there is technology now that will be able to pull out that ink and find out what the word said in the midst of all the stains and everything on the fragment. And sure enough, what they find is that it's part of the book of Esther, and it's just stained in wine, which plays out perfect when you're celebrating Purim.
The rabbis say, went to an Orthodox synagogue. My dad was not a drinker or anything, but the rabbis gave permission. You're to get drunk on Purim. You're to get drunk.
Yep.
It is a rabbinic law, and they argue that you should be drunk enough where you can't tell the difference between the name of Haman, the evil guy, and Mordecai, the good guy. I found that hilarious because here is the scroll soaked in wine.
Yeah,
and evidently they did it. And Chris, do you mind if I read this one paragraph?
Please.
It's the heading on the paragraph is merrymaking Essene style. Now, you've been to the Qumran. I've been there, and they tell you about the Essenes. They were pretty boring guys. They didn't even talk. I don't know how I could never exist as
they would have kicked you out of that camp.
I would have been out of there so fast.
Me too.
You're not allowed to talk. But anyway,
I could just see you there. Wait, you can't talk? You're out. You can't talk?
I'd say, this is bupkis. This is nothing. I cannot take this.
You're a bunch of schmageggies. I'm out of here.
That's right. You're Michigana dealing Michigas. We're going through all our Yiddish words.
That's right. Exactly.
Right. It says, however, the most fascinating find discovered by Dr. Emmanuel Samach Vatov Lev was not in the scroll itself, but right nearby in the bottom of a jug. Though it apparently initially to be a small rock, advanced scientific techniques found it to be some very stale pastries and a Judean candy known as la'af ta'afi. This find likely indicates that the custom of mishlach manot, sending portions of food to one another, was practiced at Qumran along with the reading of the Megillah. It's amazing.
All the evidence is there.
Pastries, they were probably hamantashen.
That's right. All the evidence was there of this moment. They're reading the scroll. They've had too much to drink. They knock the wine bottle over. It spills out all over the manuscript.
And they probably said, leave it.
That's right. And then what they do is they grab their food, they put it in the bottom of the jug, and they leave it in there, and that's it. And then they find it 2,000 years later, and here it is. We say, no, Esther, we could never find Esther. Well, here it is.
It was there all the time.
It was stained and soaked in wine.
They probably forgot that they put it there.
That's exactly right. So anyway, we thought that was interesting. For all the time, Steve, I've said to people, Esther's not there. Esther's not there. I've heard it even from scholars say it.
No more.
That's right. See how quick it can change on a dime? All of a sudden, that scholarship.
Let's go from the ridiculous to the amazing.
That's right. So this comes from the bizjournal.com.
Boy, what a contrast. Tov.com and the bizjournal.
Torah.com, now the bizjournal.com. That's right. We're going from Bible to business here. Okay, so putting Israeli water technology to use worldwide. Steve, what's going on? I know that this was interesting to you. It is
so interesting to me. I actually saw a video about it. And Chris, Israel is trying to be able to provide life for the world.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we know that the author of life, the Lord Jesus Christ, is certainly Jewish and came out of Israel. But we know that water's life, mayim in Hebrew, water. And they are actually exporting water now. At one point in time, the Sea of Galilee was the only source for Jordan, for them. And if it was drought year after year, that's how they found the Jesus boat. The Sea of Galilee was way, way down. Now they're desalinating water.
Mm-hmm.
They have plenty of water. They're replenishing the Sea of Galilee. They're exporting water to Jordan. They are, through their technology, they're making places in Africa that look like the Sahara Desert.
Yep.
It's now blooming, and they're supplying food. And when you watch the video, the article is different source than the video. But when you see that, you can see that Israel's interested in helping other countries. Israel wants to feed the hungry and help them, and they want to supply technology. And they want to do so in Muslim countries.
That's right.
Because the arid climate is not conducive for farming, but they can make it happen.
You know, even in the article, it mentions a Israeli named Simcha Blas. I don't know if you know that name or not, but he is the gentleman. He actually worked for the Israeli water company back in the 50s and 60s. I think he oversaw it. And water is a precious thing in Israel. It is precious. And as you were even talking about, Jordan, I think Syria at times, and Israel, they all were pulling from the same water source. And as the state of Israel continued to grow and Jordan continues to grow, I mean, everybody's just pulling from a one river, and it was
Dead Sea was almost drained.
Exactly. There was no water getting down to the Dead Sea from the Sea of Galilee. So in the 1950s and 60s, Simcha Blas is running the water company. There's a pipe that's down in the desert, and it's carrying water. Desert that there's a tree that's growing next to it. And he's going, why is this? This is a miracle tree. What is going on here? This random tree. And here, the pipe had a tiny leak, just the tiniest leak. And the thing would just drop water, one little drop. And that tree was flourishing because of that one little drop. And it came to Simcha Blas's mind that I'm going to take this idea and create what was called drip technology, what we use today. Many arid areas use drip technology. That was all created and invented in Israel. And it mentions it as
by a plumbing problem.
That's exactly right. Just see a little drip. And now, how do the deserts bloom in Israel? That's something that they talk about a lot. The deserts bloom. They're making tomatoes, and they're growing vegetables and fruits and all this in the desert. Well, how do they do that? Because of this technology. And now they've mastered desalination, which no other country's been able to do before. We've understood how to do desalination, but Israel is the ones who perfected it on a mass scale. And now they're able to even export this water.
It's amazing.
To the world and areas of the world that are in desperate need for water.
And whether they are Muslim, Christian, atheists, It doesn't matter to Israel. Again, it's another evidence of what a democracy, the people, what they want to do. A democracy flourishes when the people are unleashed and when they know that they have a safety. And we're seeing that Israel has been that place for Jewish people. It's been a place for them to flourish, and they want other people to flourish.
It's true. That's fantastic. Well, Steve, you know what time it is.
Oh, I know.
It's that time. It is that time. And there's a little story behind this Yiddish word that we have. I'm hoping
There
that you
is
talk
a
about
story, Chris.
Hold on a minute. Hang on a second. It's the Yiddish word of the day, everybody. All right, Steve.
All right. My daughter, from time to time, has told me that she listens to the Jew and the Gentile podcast.
Hi, Shayna.
That's
Shayna Leary.
That's right, Shayna Leary. And so she said to me, Dad, I don't understand. You have the Yiddish period of time at the end of the podcast, and my name, Shayna, is Yiddish. And you're right. And so I came to you, Chris, and said, it's amazing. She said this maybe a week or 2 weeks ago, and we're doing the book of Ruth. And what do we talk about in chapter 2, Chris?
We're talking about Ruth, and there's Boaz going, who is this person? You stick around. Stay here.
Who has a Shayna Punim? 2 words.
Shayna Punim.
Shayna means beautiful. In fact, my granddaughter, her daughter's named Bella. That's Italian for beautiful. So she's
never thought of.
She's keeping the name going.
Intentional?
I think so.
Okay.
I hope so. But either way, it is so. So
it is reality.
It is reality. So Punim is face. And of course, when Jewish, especially older Jewish people see a little baby, oh, look at the Shayna Punim, the pretty face. And what did Boaz see?
That Shayna Punim.
Ruth was another pretty face.
That's good.
Yeah, got to get it out.
That's right. That getting those words out, it can be hard, especially when you're tying Yiddish and Hebrew and English together. Who knows what comes out sometimes?
Absolutely.
Shayna Punim. All right, I think I have some a definition here.
Oh, maybe you got a sentence or two that they gave.
It says Shayna Punim is right. It writes, I know. It's 2 words. The phrase means pretty face, like you said, Shayna pretty, Punim face, and it's what my grandma always used to call me. This is a person talking about Shayna Punim. It makes me think of my grandparents, and it always made me feel special.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
Shayna Punim.
I've started using it with my kids, and just makes me so happy to think about using the language of my grandparents and great-grandparents.
Let me tell you a funny story. My daughter, if she is listening or will listen to this, she was named Shayna. She had she didn't really like it growing up. I think she likes it much more now as an adult. But one of the times she was trying to tell us how awful it is, somebody came up, oh, Shayna, my dog is named Shayna.
You're killing me here, buddy.
That was not good. But no, she likes her name now, and we're glad. We love that name. Golda Meir's sister was named Shayna.
Oh, really?
Yep.
This weekend I spoke in a church in West Virginia, Lewis Memorial Baptist Church. Great time, great people. And I was going through Exodus chapter 34. And Moses says, or the Lord says to Moses, I'm going to show myself to you, but you can't see my face and live. And I know the Hebrew word for face is punim, which is basically like punum for Yiddish. So it's basically derives
close.
Right from the Hebrew. But I thought that it jogged my memory of it's been a great time. Shayna Punim's the word. I hope that if you're interested in reading the news articles that we had about Israel and the abundance of water that they're sharing with the world, or with the Esther fragment that they found and uncovered and found out that it was soaked in wine, and amazing from the Dead Sea Scrolls. You can find all this information about our show on our show notes, which you can see on our podcast or even on our YouTube page. You can get all those links at our show notes if you're ever wondering how can I read these articles. But Steve, it's been a great episode.
Great, I loved it. Chapter 3 is going to be even more fun.
It's going to be great. Let me do a quick reminder for you, everybody, as we're closing out. Number 1, the Jew and Gentile podcast is sponsored by FOI Equip. And you know what we want you to do? We want you to go to foiequip.org, and there you can register for all of our FOI Equip classes. You can see all of the classes that we've already done. They're all available on YouTube. So go to foiequip.org. Be sure to register for Ty's class tomorrow night, Thursday. It's gonna be a great time of studying something very difficult, actually, the anti-Semitism. But Ty does a fantastic job. Please go to foiequip.org. Thank you for being a part of the Jew and Gentile podcast. We will see you next week.